Aegislash is one of the most versatile characters in the game and also one of the deepest and most complex. There is not one set playstyle for this character, so I'm going to talk about how to excel with this character both offensively and defensively while breaking down some of its strongest tools. At the end, I'll go over some meaty setups and then link a combo video from the YouTubes. Most of the information in this guide was written by a couple top Aegislash mains, Wingtide and Euclase. This guide is going to be long, so get a snack and some slurp juice. Aegislash has only 510 HP, so it is a bit on the frail side. It starts off in sword form, but regains 10 HP every time it transitions into shield form, giving it a bit more stamina than it seems at first. I'll talk about transitions in a bit. Aegislash has very damaging and long-reaching moves that allow it to completely dominate neutral in both phases, and up close the risk-reward is heavily in its favor. Whenever Aegislash has any buff, it gains access to enhanced moves. Many players call this sharp, and when you don't have any buffs, you're dull. So I'm going to use that because it's way faster than saying enhanced and unenhanced every time. This is important because Aegislash wants to constantly be sharp to use its best moves. Whenever you transition from shield to sword, you gain an attack buff as well. Again, more on that later. In sharp, all of Aegislash's moves now deal chip damage, and specific ones have improved properties. In burst mode, Aegislash is always enhanced. So for example, forward Y goes from being unsafe on block, not going that far, to going over half screen and being -8. If you want to play a campy Aegislash, poke with enhanced forward Y as much as possible to inflict chip damage. But this move is excellent point blank as well. Say you're -4 with Aegislash in field phase, no big deal. Just use forward Y, it starts up in an insane 11 frames, it crushes throws, it is a true mid that can catch jumps, and it's only -8 on block, so you can homing cancel afterwards. This move goes over half screen when enhanced, but not nearly as far normally, and normally it is unsafe on block. Sharp forward Y is one of the best attacks in the game, but for mid-range, dull isn't too bad either. Neutral Y is another effective projectile. It reaches super far and also inflicts chip damage. It goes significantly farther when enhanced. Regarding aggression, side Y is a very good tool to close the distance and mix opponents up with either a dash up grab, which can be cancelled with R, or a special cancel into Iron Head, Fury Cutter, or even forward Y, all of which can be cancelled into even on whip. Aegislash has one of the best homing attacks in the game, coming out on frame 17, which is tied for the fastest. Its homing attack is multi-hit, homing 3 avoids mid-lows and lows, and it is special cancelable. It is also shield form cancelable, so don't forget that if you press R too early after using homing instead of block, you'll get the transition into shield form. So some of the things that you can do with homing, for example, is you can cancel homing into Iron Head for shield pressure or into Fury Cutter for mix-ups. Canceling into Iron Head can also help you poke right through standard counterattacks. Fury Cutter is done with 5A and it can be ended different ways. Normally it does 80 damage. When enhanced, it can do 2 follow-ups after, and they have just frame inputs. Just frames are just when you press A at the correct timing. Fury Cutter is one reason why you want to change your forms as much as possible. After 7 changes into sword form, you gain access to Ultra Flames. On your 8th transition into sword form and every transition after that, for the rest of the round, Aegislash gets an attack and speed buff instead of just the attack buff. And during this change, you'll see a little rainbow flash around the character. Its 5AAA damage increases from 133 to 241 damage if you hit all the just frames. Now I talked about how Fury Cutter can be used as a mix-up. Here are different ways that you can end it. You can do 5A, 5AA, 5AAA, 5AX, and 5AAX. Your opponent has to predict how you will finish this attack if they want to punish. And especially when you cancel this from homing attack, it is hit confirmable. The X follow-up does a slow slash that doesn't combo from the previous hits, but is only -8 on block. Plus, it counter pierces so opponents can't just armor to beat all the follow-ups. Completing the 5AAA string is -12 on block, and therefore punishable on block if you finished with that. But the only way to consistently punish all the different enders without having to predict is to use a combination of extended state and perfect blocking, and I go over that a bit in my Pokken Basics Plus course, which is all about how to beat every character. Link below. This is a good time to talk about shield form, sword form, and when and how to transition between the two. As I stated, Aegislash starts off in sword form, but many of its moves switch its stance from sword form to shield form and vice versa. One of many examples is King's Shield, which is done with back A and leaves you in shield form. Seamlessly and safely transitioning between the two forms is very important. Sword form functions like any other character, but in shield form it gains an entirely different moveset. It can no longer use its standard counterattack, it cannot grab, it cannot block, it moves extremely slowly, and it has permanent blue armor. When opponents make contact with this armor, you do an automatic parry. If you've ever played Soul Calibur, it's like the auto guard impact mechanic a lot of characters have on their moves. As long as Aegislash is not in an actual attacking animation, it can be punished just for being in shield form by grabbing it, and this counts as a critical hit. Counter pierces break this armor too. Its moves in shield form are generally much slower than its moves in sword form, and they're more punishable on block. Though the punishes are unique because, for example, being minus 16 in shield form means the opponent usually has to still punish with a grab due to the blue armor. Let's go over some of the more notable moves in shield form in field phase. Back Y shoots out a beam upwards, which works well as an anti-air. 15 frames startup, minus 16 on block, but it recovers in armor. Side Y shoots out an angled beam in 25 frames that stuns opponents on hit. When charged, it shoots out an additional beam. Only minus 12 on block, and it can transition back to sword form by pressing R. Neutral Y starts up in 23 frames and is an okay poke, which can cancel into forward Y. It's minus 16 on block by itself. Forward Y is a 31 frame startup and shifts instantly. It's minus 24 on block, but again armored on recovery. On phase shift, it transitions back into sword form. Shield homing is 25 frame startup and it is invincible to highs starting frame 1. Outside of that, it is similar to other homings, but pressing R or B transitions instead of going into block or jump. Forward A in shield form is Flash Cannon. This move is minus 24 on block and always transitions back into sword form after it is complete, so opponents can punish this normally. 5A in shield form is Shadow Sneak, which has a ton of active frames and is mainly good as Oki, which I'll talk about at the end. Back A is Sacred Sword. This move is minus 12 on block, even though a lot of players don't realize it's punishable. More on that at the end. It puts out a mist that lasts for 10 seconds and transitions Aegislash back to sword form. The next time you go into shield form, the mist explodes, and this explosion can make several transitions into shield form, such as 8Y in dual phase, completely unpunishable and doubles as a strong Oki option. Let's talk a bit about safely transitioning. Shield form is much more functional at a distance because up close you can be grabbed after many of your moves. Shield form is often just used as a means to an end, which is getting back into sword form with the attack buff to get access to its enhanced moves. Generally, you do not want to be in your opponent's face when you are in shield form. Always try to transition out of shield form with either B or a shield form Pokemon move. R does a Ghost Dash, which has a ton of recovery, so it is not recommended. If you want to safely get out of shield form, the best way is to either just use Sacred Sword at a safe or unpunishable distance, or at a range where the opponent will only get a small punish, or B, which is a short hop, which is invulnerable to both the grabs and lows. By the way, activating support transitions from shield to sword. Now that we know how shield and sword work, let's move on to the rest of Aegislash's field phase moves, starting with Iron Head, since it allows for quick transitions into shield form. Iron Head is done with forward A and it has a plethora of uses. First off, it is the quickest way to transition into shield form and neutral without committing to an attack. To transform quickly from shield to sword and back, the common technique is to use Iron Head, but cancel it into R quickly to get into shield, then press B to hop back out into sword with the attack buff. The attack itself starts up in 27 frames and is invincible against lows on frame 5 and only minus 4 on block. In the latest patch as of the making of this video, it can now be anti-aired as if it was a mid-high, not too big of a deal in field phase. When fully charged, this move counter pierces and is plus 4 on block, good as a meaty and good for poking through counterattacks when cancelled from homing. You can use R to transition into shield before the attack comes out or after. King's Shield is a unique command counter done with back A. Aegislash gets blue armor frame 5 to 26, and after the attack it leaves it in shield form. Countering an opponent's attack grants Aegislash invincibility the way Stone Edge works, but on whiff, this can be whiff punished before the transition. When attacked while using this, Aegislash shoots out this giant light shield that stuns and counter pierces, and it debuffs the opponent's attack for 9 seconds on hit. Even if the opponent has time to block it, it's +4. This move really messes up a lot of characters' field phases. If they try to strike from far away, you can absorb the attack with this and get into shield form for free and start firing back at them from behind your permanent blue armor. Alternatively, you can hop back out of shield form and your opponent just gave you access to an attack up, an enhanced forward Y, and fury cutter for free. If they were too close when they use their projectile, they'll just get hit. Another move that's not too common is Gyro Ball or Jumping A. This can be done in both phases, but I'll just cover it right here. This move's properties get worse when the opponent has a speed debuff and better when they have a speed buff. Nothing too fancy, but a lot of players have no idea what the frame data is, so I've included it. And lastly, Aegislash's field phase grab does 80 base damage and gives it a speed buff. Why did they do this? To summarize Aegislash's field phase, Aegislash wants to be in sharp as much as possible so it can fire off forward Ys. It can do this with any buff, but an easy way to get that attack buff is to cancel Iron Head into R, then B to get back into sword form. Staying in shield form far away from the opponent isn't a terrible idea, but up close it's likely to get punished. When rushing down, side Y helps to close the gap, and homing attack is just excellent. Its cancels into either Iron Head or Fury Cutter make it dangerous to try to counter against it. Alright, this guide is getting really long, so for dual phase, I'm going to mostly skip the moves that are just straight up bad or really niche, like Dual 4X. Aegislash has just as strong of a dual phase as it has a field phase, maybe even better. It shuts down most of the character's neutral with its super far reaching moves, and up close it has fast attacks that force the opponent into high commitment guesses. Aegislash's 4Y, specifically sharp 4Y, is probably the best move in the game. Well, the best dual phase move. Chandeler's forward Y and field, the best field phase move. Sharp 4Y is an 11 frame true mid, which is only -4 on block. 4Y also gives a full confirm on an aerial hit, so it makes for a great reactionary tool as well. It launches on critical hit, and being 11 frames, it crushes grabs. Therefore, this is definitely going to be your throw crush of choice. The only way most characters can deter you from spamming this move point blank is with a preemptive counterattack, but this can be grabbed on reaction for 120 damage. No, 144 damage since you're sharp. No, 180 damage since it's a critical hit. The only downside to this move is while it's dull, it's -16 on block, but again, you're going to be wanting to use this when sharp whenever possible. From a distance, spacing and keep out can be done by using Sharp 4X or using its shield form moves. Sharp 4X shoots out a giant projectile. Most characters have no choice but to respect it, since jumping over it is very difficult and it also pierces armor. Aegislash's body itself pierces too. The only drawback is now this attack decreases how long Aegislash's buffs last and consequently its sharp enhancement. Iron Head 6A is a pretty good lungy, especially when opponents aren't properly reacting to it by either jumping or anti-airing. Again, 27 frames, so it's pretty fast. Fully charging it is mostly for Oki. Put that at the end. Now, shield form has strong defensive options, but only mediocre offensive options. Shield form 6A Flash Cannon is a good tool to apply chip, shield damage, and shift back into sword. But be aware that this laser is slow and is very minus on block, -24 specifically, so don't use it within a punishable range of the opponent. 4Y in shield form is a very strong anti-air on reaction, so jumping against shield form is almost always a bad idea. Shield form 4A, Sacred Sword, the best move in shield form. It's 15 frame startup, knocks down, creates a miss. This move is -12, so it is punishable, but it's spacing dependent. Aegislash also has extremely strong options for whiff punishing. 4Y is good against options with mild recovery, and if you're not confident in going for a slower, more risky, but higher rewarding punish. One of those high rewarding punishes is 6X. It has an extremely long range. It is 19 frame startup, converts into a lot of damage, at least 200. if you have more than 4 phase shift points to spare. Outside of a whiff punish tool, this is quite a risky attack since it's minus 20. That doesn't stop the top Aegislash from using it, but it is risky. That said, at max distance, even characters with great fast normals like Shadow Mewtwo cannot even punish it. Do you see that? That's crazy. Jump Y is a very strong tool to pull opponents close in. Jump Y alone is hard to react to and in most cases safe on block. With proper spacing it can even be plus. Jump Y, however, is more punishable, and when fighting Aegislash it's important to realize the difference. Jump Y does not reel the opponent in and it kind of sends the shield upwards a bit. This move is most useful against zoner type characters that you must fight head on. Pull them into that 4Y range. In close range, Aegislash has some incredibly strong options for pressure. Some of Aegislash's best normals up close are 5X, 2Y, 4Y, and 5YY. 5X is a 19 frame special mid, multi-hit normal move that has several cancel options from it even on whiff. It can cancel into parry when it is not enhanced. I'll talk more about this at the end since it's a great meaty tool. 2Y, 11 frame startup low that avoids highs and lows. In fact, Aegislash's low stance specifically avoids highs and lows. It's very interesting. You don't get much from 2Y itself besides 25 damage and it being plus 4 on hit, but it can annoy opponents long enough to get them to start pressing buttons long enough to get grabbed. 4Y was explained earlier, best dual phase move in the game. 5YY is good simply to pressure your opponent. When sharp, the jabs have multiple hits, making it very easy for them to stuff out counters if you happen to jab into them. 2X is an advancing slide that leaves a lingering projectile only on whiff. This projectile is most useful as Oki, but as Oki, it must be respected and leaves you very plus after they block it. Do note that if you're using this move in neutral, you can actually be grabbed like out of this as if you weren't even attacking. So do keep that in mind if you're not making contact with this move instantly and you're just throwing it out in neutral. 8Y is Aegislash's main reactionary anti-air, even though 4Y is excellent preemptively. 8Y has a wide hitbox that hits on both sides. It is unsafe on block since it transitions into shield form at minus 20. That said, if you have the mist out from Sacred Sword, 4A, then your transition is completely safe. Last thing for dual phase we'll cover is one of Aegislash's best reversals. This can actually be done in field phase 2 with forward R. This parry gives counter armor from frame 1 to 11 and instantly repels physical attacks. Even attacks that normally can be cancelled to be safe against command counters get beaten out. This increases your synergy gauge and it grants a different amount of hit stun depending on if it parried a light or a heavy hit. However, against aerial attacks, the opponents will air reset. Now for a few Oki options. Iron Head is one of the best Oki options in the game. It does a ton of chip damage, does a ton of shield damage, and leaves Aegislash plus 4. In addition, you can cancel the charged Iron Head with R to go into shield stance. In dual phase, charged Iron Head into Sacred Sword is a true block string and does enough pushback to the point where most characters cannot punish it. In normal circumstances, outside of synergy burst, it is only punishable by Lucario, Pikachu, Pikachu Libre, Aegislash, Mewtwo, Shadow Mewtwo, Garchomp, Scizor, Machamp, and Suicune. Some of these punishes are very light hits, so in most cases it's best to go for the full setup anyways. Shadow Sneak, which is done with Shield Form 5A, is probably Wingtide's favorite Oki, not Euclase's favorite. But you can use this when you get an air tech with charged Iron Head in neutral. Use this when you want to keep on corner pressuring the opponent. Wingtide says this is one of the best Oki in the game, but do not use it in neutral. This move is extremely active. I put a clip here to demonstrate that. This move counter pierces, does a ton of chip damage, super plus on block, and the disjointed hitbox means that you're not stuck in an animation while this is making contact with the opponent. 5X is multi-hit, special cancelable, and cancelable into other heavy attacks. I don't even know, that is ridiculous. Dash cancelable as well. This attack is very underused. It's safe on every 19 frame reversal, but it's not safe against the 15 and 11 frame reversals. Similarly to jab, you have to react accordingly to cancel this into what the opponent is pressing. To summarize dual phase, from far out, Aegislash can use jumping Y, sharp 4X, and even 6X at max distance if you're being greedy to nullify opposing normals. Close up, sharp 4Y is the best normal in the game. There's no reason not to lean heavily on it, but it has many other options as well. And quickly on Aegislash burst mode, it leaves it enhanced the whole time, and I've written the frame data on its burst attacks in shield form and sharp form. That's it for Aegislash. This was much more in-depth than most of my other character guides. Thanks again to Wingtide and Euclase for providing much of the information I shared here. If you want guides for every other character in the game, they're all in my Pokken Basics course.
Easiest thing I ever done in my life.